Good evening. I'd like to call this Whately School Committee meeting on March 6th to order, 7 o'clock. Tonight is public hearing about the proposed FY 26 budget. Do we want to do some other little things first, or do we just want to jump into the public hearing first?
Well, you have the public hearing, you have to do first.
Okay. So we're gonna have, we're gonna do the public hearing first, and we're gonna turn it over to Shelley. Right.
Sorry, I'm logged in now. I was on behind the wall. Yep. Yeah, he's in good. Try again. Why is it gray? Oh, there it goes. That was weird. Okay. Okay, so there's no new changes to the budget since we last met. We're moving forward as we discussed at the February meeting. So I'll go through this relatively quickly, especially considering I think everyone in the room has heard some of the preliminary build up about budgets. So the first couple slides of this presentation talk about how the budget is developed. So we look at needs-based, student-centered, taking a hybrid approach to meet level services, which does not mean level funding. It just means that we've replicated programs from the prior year, but there's always increased costs with level services because at a minimum you have changes for COLA for salaries and wages. The timeline is here. You can see where we are in March. We start deliberations in January. Administration starts prior to that. And then town meeting, I heard is April 28th. I think that's what Fred told me at the last meeting. These are the major drivers that impact budget growth. Salaries and wages is always the primary. You're going to see as we go through the presentation that they make up about 3/4 of our total budget. Benefits is typically another significant factor, but here at Whately, because benefits are paid for by the town, the only benefit portion in the budget is central office expenditures. Special education costs are always a significant driver, transportation, facilities, and then any new initiatives that we may consider. These are the expenses in the budget. So if you're looking at the line by line, these are the different DESE function categories. You also see these on the monthly reports. So these are the primary expense codes that we use. And then looking at 26, what does it cost to educate Whately Elementary School students? So all funds, which includes grants, revolving, and general funds, is just shy of 2.8 million for FY 26. Our general fund is being presented today at public hearing at $2,262,599. That is a 10.11% increase over FY 25. So before I keep going, I want to get into this a little bit further. Level services, which includes adjustments primarily for salaries and wages. We did make some other minor changes in level services to expense accounts. For example, if you remember, we had the conversation about adding $2,000 to cover the water bill that we haven't previously had to pay. So it's really looking at expenses and making adjustments based on actuals, and then salaries and wages for building-based staff, including teachers, IAs, principal's office, and then central office staff, cafeteria, and custodial as well. We are requesting $66,000 for 2 new positions. That adds a 3.21% increase to the budget for a total of 10.11%. Grants and revolvings make up a percentage, almost $180,000 and almost $580,000 in revolving funds, respectively.
And for those who weren't listening in on the finance meeting, we did have that $58,000 that was taken out for buyback, buyback.
Yeah.
And I had talked to Darius. I don't know if you found anything out about this, but I had heard that in previous years, employees had taken that in over the course of 2 years instead of 1. It not only helps us, but it also helps the employee with tax situation. So I don't know if that has been presented to either of these people, but that would also help
So based on the contract, it's in the contract that they're paid out within 30 days of their retirement date.
Okay,
So if they wish to defer or spread over 2 years, we couldn't advise them for tax reasons to do that, but they could request it. And then we could accommodate that, and it would be helpful if that did happen. However,
so it can't come from us.
we already know of another retirement, don't we? Which
That's coming
will,
up.
that will come
So-
for 27.
So what Shelley's trying to say, Shelley and I did talk about it.
We did.
You know, and so that was, obviously what she said was the first thing, and then we have another one next year, so she's kind of like, if we're just gonna push this along,
It's just gonna add up.
it's just gonna be next year's problem, and then next year, we're gonna split that one. So in this particular, you could, right, I mean, it could help out a little if you did it, but you're just kind of spreading it out over multiple years.
And then if we had a teacher who didn't want to defer, because in 27, we are gonna have another payout based on
Right.
what we know right now.
Right.
So if the current one were deferred by half, then we're 1.5 times, for a payout, so.
How long do you want to?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a great
Can be-
idea.
Well, I
can be
also
done, yeah.
want the employees to know that that is an option for them as well, because that could help them on their end.
Right, and I talked to the union president about that, about maybe that's something we can talk about down the road, if that's something they're interested in more contractually, because they should be interested in doing that,
Right.
in a way that, one, it can help the school out and how much is going on each year. It also can help the employee from tax advantage, but that would be something that would be negotiated, something we can't advise tax advice to employees have to.
Right,
But,
right.
if they would, just kind of just thinking about it, that's something they'd be interested in the longer term.
Okay,
Because a
And
lot
we
of,
have had a couple of people do it, I think primarily at Frontier.
Yeah.
But
right,
it comes up.
Frontier became, those were, I don't want to say in the know, but those who talked about it were like, you know what, if I defer this a year, it's less taxes, I get a different tax bracket. They just deferred either another whole year, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? So they didn't get it the same year they taught, so that way you don't get.
it's not on top of your salary.
It's on top of your salary, right? You
Right,
just
right,
do it
right.
in your own thing.
Gotcha.
You guys want to hold all balls, please? Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Bob, Chrissy's gonna need you on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Lunchtime.
Recess.
Okay, so what does our per student cost look like? Based on 133 students, which includes our school choice and our resident population, our cost per student for fiscal year 26 is $20,955. And what changed in the general fund? So the primary drivers of the significant increase in the budget relate to the grant and the revolving fund adjustment. The grant and revolving fund adjustment refers to ESSER money that is no longer available, and then a revolving fund change in our early childhood tuition account. Those two pieces increased the budget 2.92% before we even looked at salaries and wages or any other expenditures. Wage increases there, minor non-wage adjustments, and then the new request, which is for 2 new IA positions, which is based on IEP needs, and we are required to meet those students' needs by providing one-to-one services with an IA, which is why that is included in the budget. Couple of other things, Beth did talk about the $58,000 in sick buyback. That was removed from the general fund, but we are still asking the town for that money, so that's an additional 2.82% that the town will have to fund. And this budget also does include the 0.5 full-time equivalent math interventionist that we added last year. We talked about taking that out at some point, but ultimately decided it's in the best interest of the students to keep that position on for at least another budget year. So that's included here as well. The original budget that we talked about in January was at 14.28%. So we've brought this down. Removing the sick buyback helped, and asking the town to fund that separately. And then we applied $35,000 of rural aid funds, which, as we've talked about, subject to state appropriation, little bit of a risk to use funds that are not guaranteed, particularly when it's almost a 2% budget increase if we didn't have that funding. But 14.28 is really significantly high. 10.11 is still high, but we were able to supplement a little bit.
Can I ask how our cost per student compares to the similarly sized schools Are we around the same?
around the same. So the next few slides get into how expenses are distributed, so I'm just gonna read this off and then we can quickly glance over the pie charts. It's really clear that in our budget, the majority of expenses are wages. It's also really clear that the majority of our budget goes directly to teaching and learning. So we're meeting the needs of the students with the funds we have available. Pupil services, which represents primarily transportation, is about 6%. Building operations, 11, and then administration and benefits are 6% as well. Again, that's a minor portion of benefits. The town covers the benefits for our school employees, so it's a more significant burden for them than it is for us. Administrative costs account for superintendent's office, business office, and school committee expenses. And then just to give you a visual of what that looks like, everything in orange on these next slides is instruction-based expenditures, whether they're salaries and wages. So you can see that it's really teaching and learning based. Our budget is built on that, as it should be. Salaries and wages, over 3/4 of that pie. Other expenditures are a little bit more evened out. You can see student services in green, that's primarily transportation, operations and maintenance, which does include no, it does not include the staff. That's on a different slide. So this is just to take care of the building itself and then instruction. Central office, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. The total is about $250,000. Majority of that is for salaries and wages. And this is just Whately's portion of that. Is
Did that change this year at all? Did it fluctuate?
There's always a small fluctuation in the cost share percentage, but nothing significant. All right, that was quick, easy peasy, right, as far as presentation, not so
Yeah.
easy as far as the number. But just as a reminder, the 2.2 million is the general fund that we're moving forward. You all will vote on the 25th, is that accurate? To move forward with this budget of 10.11% over FY '25. Our total budget just shy of 2.8 million. And unless you have questions, that is all I have. I gave you historical information on the last page, which you've also already seen. The budget has fluctuated pretty significantly in Whately year to year. Some of the other schools in our district are more leveled out, but we did have the big increase for transportation last year, and the average has been 3.42% over 6 budget cycles.
Did you say you met with the officials?
Well, I mean.
Other than the time
we went with them.
Okay, that's the only time we've met with them, and they don't want to see us?
They haven't heard anything.
Okay.
So, at the end of that meeting, it was kind of, they assumed.
They knew our
Well, I
situation.
assume they would have reached out to us if they weren't gonna confirm that.
Yeah,
You haven't heard anything, have you?
I don't know if they've had another meeting, like, I don't know if they've discussed amongst themselves. I want to say they haven't yet. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of questions. I mean, Darius did a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you. But there was a lot of, there's a lot of discussion about special education, as we talked about there that night, and the cost of that, and early intervention, and that's what a good portion of this budget is, you know, yeah, we don't know what they have for funding, you know, that's the part, right? It's like saying.
Right, that's like, are they gonna be able to take care of that 58,000, or does that come back to us and then we have to move things around? I don't know. Like, there wasn't much feedback as far as that.
If the 58,000 comes back to us, we're talking over 2% more on the top of the 10,
Right,
which is close now to 13. You know, it's.
But a lot of schools went through this giant ask last year, right? Like, we only went for 5% increase, but don't I remember
This
seeing
is
a
the
big
most
slide?
significant
Yeah.
that
It's the
it's
biggest
done.
bill.
This is the biggest, since I've been on, this is the biggest we've ever had.
Sunderland's had a few significant increases, but not
No.
over 10.
Yeah, but in those cases, I think, didn't they, correct me if I'm wrong, did they have to do an override?
A few years ago, 2019 or 2020, they were over 13%
Yeah.
and needed an override, but even the last few
I'm thinking,
years.
maybe it's more like remembering seeing slides for schools like Long Meadow that were asking for
Oh,
17,
other
you know what I mean?
districts
So like,
around
it's
us,
good.
yeah.
Our 4 schools now, this is the largest of our
Yeah.
4 schools.
Or you could do like Belchertown,
No, I'm just saying that there's like. I think it's our
Belchertown
turn.
is, you know,
What was their ask?
oh, they're 2 million in the hole. Close the school and cut another 25. They cut 17 last year, they wanna cut another 25 this year and close an elementary school. For their
Enrollment is just down that much? or-
2.1 million.
I don't know what caused theirs to go so bad,
2 million.
but it is
gigantic.
huge. Their district's the same size as Frontier, so.
And Mohawk.
Let's go into the meeting with that as the first
Yeah.
slide.
Right, I mean,
And I don't mean to make light of their plight, because that's a serious issue, but
They had huge expansion and then it just stopped.
so sort of like betting against growth.
I guess I don't know what the story is, but they, and so,
That's
they're
awful. Okay.
closing the pool and, cutting athletics,
The hard stories that you hear,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, the truth is that the budget is not inflated. The budget is meeting the needs of our resident students. You know, we have a minimal amount, minimum of IAs. And if people are out and if Chrissy can't find a sub, she's covering classes or recess or whatever it is. It's not like we have 20 IAs with 133 students, and the 2 new positions are to meet the needs of resident students. So, the math interventionist, that is something that school committee could have decided to cut, but it's something that we're willing to ask for and ask the community to fund to meet resident student needs. So,
I think if the community pushes back, we could have that conversation again, but that would be what they would be
Yeah.
voting against. The first, if they say like, how you usually reduce the budget would be that position, right? That's it made an impact this year. I talked about those who were at the meeting, well, half a year here, but our math scores through our internal testing have gone way up. But we're also doing a math curriculum. So we have a new math curriculum, focus on math, and we have a math interventions. So causation, we can't feel that out
Probably
every
the
year,
combination,
Well, actually, but I remember
focus on that.
Things are getting better.
Wasn't the presentation that when you introduce a new curriculum, you can expect a dip for 3 years and then,
We're not seeing that dip.
so I'm just saying, like, I would.
Chrissy can probably comment more if she sees it in action in the classroom more than I do.
If you have a school that meets an Excel spreadsheet need, but doesn't serve the students, then your school's failing, right? Like that's, I know it's a big ask. I just feel incredibly okay with saying if kids start school choicing out because we can't meet the needs of students, that's more problematic than having a big ask, right?
And I think that's where we have to, within our system, we communicate with select board and finance committee, and we say, this is what our need is. And they need to communicate back if they can't afford that, right? And we try to be, through years, we try to have good budgets. This time we're needing more, and they need to let us know if they don't have the funds to do it. So that we have to figure out how we react to that, right? And it can be that, we push back and say, no, we really do need this, or we say, okay, this is what we're gonna have to do, and the community can give a reaction to that. And that's just how that.
and I think it goes both ways moving forward. So, my brain's already thinking about what does fiscal year 27 look like? If a student moves out of district or a 6th grader with a 1-to-1 moves on to Frontier, then we have to be willing to adjust. Just because we're adding these 2 positions right now for IEP needs doesn't mean they're forever in the budget. Like, we have to be willing to look at that.
Same with the
stuff, too.
transportation issue, and I mean, there's always fluctuations in the sense that I know I'm relatively new to the board, is that you've never tried to, push the boundaries of the budget. It's always been a very honest reflection of exactly what we can,
yeah,
what we need.
we're not like, oh, we're gonna put a little extra in there,
Yeah.
No, and I
I mean, the
extra.
yacht you bought is beautiful, and I really can't wait. Yeah, no, I'm totally.
Families can sign up for
Yeah.
The math interventionist has really been the one new big ask that we've had outside of these 2 IAs in,
And that just
At least
brought us
since
in line with what's
2019.
been happening in schools.
right.
And it was also something that was here for many years before. I mean, that was a position that was here when I was in
Well,
school.
she did more than that.
Right,
And she had many hats on.
right. But I'm just
About,
saying that math help was there
Yeah,
in the past.
And if she's having this impact in being half-time as well, It's
Yeah.
really impressive.
Well, like Darius said, it's a combination of factors. The math that we used to use, everyone was kind of using a different program.
Right.
Which does not lend itself to.
Right.
And so I think having us all on the same page, having all the teachers being able to participate in the same professional development around the same program, I think it's had big impact. And as well as the interventionist, I think it was a good combination.
Yeah, one of the teachers wrote us a lovely email
Yeah.
about, a couple for students that see this interventionist and how excited they are about math now, and, they're so much more confident, and, that's a great
It's
thing.
huge.
So, we just say the process, you're not voting the budget tonight, so you're doing that on March 25th at 6 PM.
Which at that meeting, we still could make changes
So
if
you
something
can-
came
so
up.
If they give us a hint that
Right,
it
so
might not
you
be.
can lower your ask after public hearing, you can't raise your ask, okay, without having another public hearing.
Okay, so
Okay.
if they say, for example, they can't fund those two outside positions.
Well, they would have to give us, we would ask them to give us a number recommendation, because our job is to make a decision on what we're
Got it, okay,
funding.
so,
I just wanna say that a lot, because like within roles of our roles, is they would say, you know what, we can't, we need you to come down by $50,000. And then this is how it technically should work. If we need to come down by $50,000 in order for us to make it, you would then say, as a board, you would direct the administration to give you proposals of reducing the budget by $50,000. We would then come back with a proposal of reducing $50,000, you then either agree or disagree, that kind of thing. What we try not to do is, public debate what cuts, because that can get turned sideways, because you may not know, some things you don't want to debate, you're debating people's jobs, you're doing that, that's kind of like, you want to kind of let administration figure it out, come through with a proposal. You can reject a proposal and say, yes, we're not looking to cut, lunch. You know what I mean? I'm doing this thing, I don't want to put anything out there that anybody sticks to. You know what I mean? We want the kids to eat. We're like, well,
superintendent says no more lunch.
That kind of thing. So the process-wise, that's the way it works. The 25th meeting, just also saying out loud now, will be a virtual meeting, because we have back-to-back meetings that night, because we did second meetings for budget. I'll make sure it gets posted in Frontier. Sorry, Chris. I said it was hybrid, so Chris was the only one that showed up. Give you a shout out, Chris, on live national television. But if we think it's, if we have to do major changes, we'll talk about that. And if we have to have a different meeting or another meeting, that is also, always, if things go sideways, we create the schedule in order to do our business.
No.
It should be, I'll be fine, but I'm telling you everybody how it works, so that,
Positive
But
thoughts.
typically, the town doesn't come back in between these two meetings and say, we can't do it.
But just in case,
What?
so it's a.
But we also never proposed a 10%
Right,
increase
yes,
before,
you're
so
absolutely
it's,
correct.
but we have a great town, we have great people that support us, so it's,
Exactly, and I'm assuming they would give us some warning if.
yes.
I can send a note, I'll send a note over to Pete and say, hey, we haven't heard anything.
Yeah,
Are you good?
It's on Tuesday's finance committee agenda.
okay.
There you go.
Tuesday?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Chris is going to let us know. He'll give us
Yeah,
a
it's
call.
our inside.
You want to write you an
I have
article?
about 4 different meetings.
Yeah, he's like, I'll write you an article, how about that, in the paper.
Okay, at this time, are we all done?
Oh, yeah, close.
At this time, I'd like to close the public hearing for the FY 26 budget and continue on with our regular agenda. First is to approve the minutes from February 4th.
Motion to approve the minutes as they stand.
Second.
All in favor? You're next with our budget, please. Today's budget.
I don't have anything to report on for 25 except for the warrant totals, which, 10 warrants were signed electronically totaling $58,571.33. I did send you the expense reports. There have been some things at other schools, but nothing here, right, has come up that maintenance wise or
I
anything.
Conway's experience.
Yeah, there's some other things, but
Not something.
I know, I shouldn't say that. Neutralize. Don't put that thought in the air.
Let's wait until the basketball tournament's over this
Yeah.
weekend and then I'll let you know.
Got only like 3 hoops this year, so.
25 budget has about $100,000 remaining to be spent between now and the end of the year, so we're in good shape.
And we're not in a position where we should freeze all spending or anything like that. I mean,
Well, it's definitely something to consider if we didn't want to go in with a 10% budget increase, so.
And we gave them back a little bit, maybe. I mean, that's what we would do if we didn't spend it all year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I know, I just,
ultimately it would
Yeah.
save them.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any public on? Is there anybody else there?
Yeah, there's people there, yeah.
I think we got
I can
I
see
think
it.
Jody was there, right?
Yeah, Sally, Lauren.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
If they're not yelling,
just listen in, I think.
okay.
Yeah, mics are still up.
Okay, if there's, unfinished business, if we want to talk about the FY '26 budget, we can. If not, we already have, we can just go on to new business if you like. First thing is, talk about the calendar.
So you have the calendar was sent to all of you, that's the first reading of it, so we'll vote it at the joint meeting in April. Because we made this like the business meeting, the 25th is really just a budget meeting, so that's why your first reading, tonight, your second reading will be the April budget. So it will be the joint meeting, so any questions on it? It emulates the kind of what we did this year, a little bit different around the holiday break, fit with the holidays, so you can kind of look at it. The association has approved for us to start prior to the last Wednesday in August, so they have to do that as part of the contract. Remember that, so they remind that rather so that they have agreed to get started terms back, so.
And we'll vote on it next month.
So we'll vote it as the full joint committee, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Next is a school committee calendar.
So right now, we've asked the chairs to get together and discuss the full calendar. We have a draft. Did the digital draft get part of that package? Raquel?
I think so.
So she created basically looking at this year's and putting something together. She also included all the night meetings that I do per year, just so they have a sense of why we're kind of really asking for school committees to try to reduce them. If there's ways to reduce. One of the ideas that I don't know if you've been kind of talking to me about it, but one of the things they've been talking about is possibly combining 2 schools together for the September and October meeting. They would just reduce, 2 meetings each month, that's 4 meetings total, but combining like yourselves in Conway, right? And so, and when you basically, overall, it's easy to do in the sense of, Shelley goes through a lot of the stuff that we discuss is, especially at those meetings, it's when it's outside of budget, outside of like how the finance report is, you can just do each one, principal's report, you can do each one, and then everything else is usually the same. So if anything was to go sideways, we can always hold another meeting. Like, let's say we had a major problem and we expect a lot of public and, those kind of things, we can announce it.
I think we could piggyback with Conway and for 1 month and Conway can come down here in October, we go up there in
We would
September type of
definitely,
thing.
right,
They're
we would
driving
definitely,
down here.
yes, we would definitely.
East side of Conway Road, yeah.
We'll be here in December, January,
Yeah.
February, March.
Well, December, we haven't had meetings the last
Right.
2 years, which is,
But that's the idea to kind of
Yeah.
think through, to try something, another thing out there, to give feedback was, people, one of the problems with, Shelley and I's position is that you just don't know what we're doing when we're not doing weekly business, right? And so when you see it kind of on paper, you're like, oh, you have to do that, and you have to do that, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, wow, it adds up, because while we say it, I don't know, sometimes it's kind of, I think it's just, it's good to see that, I don't know, sometimes we feel guilty, like, and so we like to, show that we're, like, we feel guilty, like, yeah, like, we are working hard, we promise, like, there's just a lot of meetings.
I also just love that idea. It makes me feel less siloed, right? Here are other committee members working through the same thing. It's other voices to bounce ideas off of. And again, to your point, I have no idea what's happening in these schools. And it'd be great to share in their excitement and commiserate when needed. I think it's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
And the other kind of side note is that the principals also just sharing what they're doing at each school, they have an idea because they talk to each other a lot, but school committee's like, oh, that's kind of a neat thing, or their PTO's doing what? Oh, we should, I mean, that kind of just, it's like, it's the same idea,
Yeah.
that cross,
So we're gonna have like dueling principals.
oh,
reports.
yes,
we're gonna
oh
see-
my God.
Who's got better signage, who's got more enthusiasm in their readings of
I
it.
did a quick, 30-page PowerPoint, to what's going on
Yeah,
in Whately
you
this
might have
month.
to put that something on the screen.
Or if you're gonna,
I did it in limerick
Snacks.
form,
you're
yeah.
gonna have better snacks than the other.
Yeah.
Oh, snacks.
We would always win on the snack.
Yeah, I would love to have a snack.
I remember during the
competition.
pandemic, you always had snacks of some kind. Remember we had the morning meetings?
Yeah, we always,
You always had
when
snacks.
when I started, we had the meetings in the morning, I started with snacks, cause I know how to
Yeah.
buy my way into.
I do miss the morning
Through
meetings.
heart.
I
You
do
do, I
too.
mean, you
There's
come
always
in, you have coffee, you're
muffins.
at work, you know,
Back when we had older people on the school committees,
yes,
we
I know.
could do that.
I can't go there.
If we have two hardworking people and one retired now,
Didn't you just wanna retire so we can have
Everything
morning
works.
meetings?
Gladly.
Well, I'll
If I
write
write you a note, can you do
Yeah,
one?
I got a student
morning
teacher this
of
Get out of
semester,
work
so.
Get out of work. This was signed by my
Yeah, like
principal.
a-
Yeah.
Principal.
There's a note from my principal, just this
We're
guy.
assigned community service.
oh,
I might ask you to write a note anyway, just to see if I could try it. I think that'd be really funny.
Where's the shop? I can put it on letterhead.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Super official.
and, next is the first reading on the policy for access to education.
Yep,
Students-
so if we could, right, at the Frontier meeting, there was a lively debate on, can we come up with a different option than, a lot of concerns about whether or not, ICE agents, should be allowed to enter the building or not. And there was, kind of a lot of heartfelt back and forth regarding, perception versus, what to do, how to do it. And so what I did this morning is we had a 4-town safety meeting. So we meet 3 or 4 times a year with all the chiefs of police, fire chiefs, and state police and sheriff's department. And we just kind of go through safety issues that are going on in schools. We talked about this and did have a conversation. Patrick did say from over in Deerfield that he'd be happy to host the conversations with ICE at the police station. So I'm putting that together now. I actually finished writing it and I sent it to him to make sure he's comfortable with the language of it. As soon as I get that, I'll send it to the subcommittee to get that looked at. So, so we're still making progress on that. So for right now, it's on the agenda, you can talk about it, give me any other feedback you may have.
Or we can wait till we get
with
the
another
new,
one.
or we can wait till we get the new policy.
So, yeah, that we can,
We will.
so I think what we could do is we can do it at the joint meeting and we can waive the 2 readings of it because of the urgency to have it in effect, so something of that sort.
When's that April meeting? Is it posted already? No. Okay.
It's on the calendar, it's April.
I didn't know if
No,
you-
April 8th, rather.
8th?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying those conversations would happen at the Deerfield Police Station,
For the four
for the 4 towns? Oh, okay.
For the 4 towns, so because the current procedure is to all warrants and immigration official business needs to go to the superintendent's office. And the superintendent's office will conduct that business at the police station. So it's kind of that kind of thing. I wrote some language in there that says in order to not disrupt the educational setting for our students, we would like to have that done there, so.
Good. Okay. I don't have anything from the
The
collaborative?
meeting's after,
Okay.
but I'm curious to see
Do you
what
have
they say.
anything for us tonight?
No,
And we don't have to go into executive session, right? Anybody else have any thoughts?
Oh, Christy, I wanted to say that your slideshow presentation that Darius gave for the finance committee is great.
I pulled like 3 slides.
I really had, I asked.
There was a
everyone-
lot of
It was
pictures.
nice to have visuals, I think, for the committee. 'Cause,
Yes.
They don't have.
Humanizes it.
School, and I thought it was.
Yeah, it was a great presentation,
And I realized while I was doing it, I have like
because You were sick, right?
I started to like,
You
it's
should
like
see
taking
it,
and
he's right
waiting,
in front,
and
you had to
I'm
take
like,
Oh,
right there,
yeah,
too.
that was a Herculean effort
Yeah,
I
there.
did say I was shameless. I was like, this is shameless. I'm just gonna throw children in front of you.
Say no to that, please.
But
Say no to
that's
that.
the
But it
point of
shows
it
all the
all.
things that you're doing here, and, you know, it's a lot.
It is a lot.
I think it was well received.
Need a motion to adjourn.
I moved to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody.